Welcome back, everybody. Good evening. How's everybody doing tonight? How you guys doing? Everybody hanging in there okay? Nikki, it's good to see you. Mikey, Derek, how you guys doing?
Life is good. Life is real good. How are you?
Good. I'm good. I hope everybody enjoyed their long weekend if they had one. I know that we were still very hard at work doing lots of really awesome stuff. But I am glad to be back here with everybody this evening. We are Legends of Avantris, and tonight we are bringing you another episode of Neon Nights and Avantris Talk Show. We are on part 3 of our first time DM survival guide. Hopefully we make a dent in what I have prepared, because we didn't get very far last week, which is, that's just an Avantris subtitle now.
Yeah, seriously. You didn't get very far.
Which is fine. That's okay. Gives us plenty of content, plenty of things to talk about. We've got a few different ways that you can support us if you are looking to do so, and we would be greatly appreciative of you if you chose to do them. Number one is our merch shop. We've got a lot of really great designs of your favorite campaigns and characters that go on a lot of really great awesome. So make sure you grab your LOA merch today. We are retiring the old logo soon. I saw some people in the Discord post some photos with their old logo merch. We're going to be updating it with a new logo soon. But more importantly, as far as the merch shop goes, we've got a really awesome little thing to show you guys. Wait, time out. Is that the original design that you made, Derek, before you actually?
This is the very first thing that I ever drew, starting to design.
Is that what you showed me in your office at work?
And
I don't know how you had everything, Derek. It's amazing.
But surely,
that's
all
incredible.
Of the little tiny designs that I came up with. Oh, that's probably worked. All of the little designs that that doesn't.
Coming in and out. Yeah, it's coming in and out.
All of the little designs. I found this, and I realized that I had to start bringing it together and starting to figure out how it's all going to come together. And I'm really proud of that. So at some point, I'll scan them and I'll share them.
Derek used to have his own office on account of the ear thing.
Yeah, so many benefits.
Yeah, so most of us kind of were in a bullpen because companies fucking suck. But so we would take lunch, a very long lunch, and just work on the logo. God, years and years and years ago. So
I wish you had told me you had that. I could have teed you up in the special announcements. We could have.
I forgot until you literally just made that announcement, and I was like, "Oh shit, I've got it right here."
It's all good.
That's all good. That's on me.
No, thank you for sharing this amazing piece of Avantris history with us. But in that same vein, the biggest announcement that we have in regards to merch is that our Hootchie campaign is officially live. Everybody has been showing us an unbelievable amount of support. But more importantly, I believe we have something that we can show off to all of you right now on stream.
What's this? What is this? Is this a makeshift bag?
Are we gonna do an unboxing? Have we really fallen that far as YouTubers?
No. Do not open that bag. My face will melt.
What's
is
in the
this
bag?
the kind of bag that a makeshift plush would come in if you were to, I don't know, maybe back one? What's a pumpkin? It's the pumpkin. Oh, it's attached to something.
That is the most adorable thing I've ever seen in my life.
There she is. She is super, super soft. She's got a cute tuft of fur. The pumpkin is spectacular. It's really well attached. She's got the most adorable little eyebrows. And she's spectacular. All of the details are embroidered on. She's a great size. And she's got her cute little toe beans.
Wow.
That's amazing.
And so the thing that was the first time we've unboxed it. So if I
didn't know you had that.
Earlier, I would have been very surprised at A, how big she is.
Yeah.
And B, just how high quality. And I know that Makeshift stuff is good, and we wouldn't have partnered with them if we didn't know it was good. But it's in one of those things where, like, until you see it, until
when you're holding it, right?
It's like, holy shit, this is it. They made the fuck out of this Hootsie.
Yeah.
Can I hold her?
Nope.
I feel like the chick they find in the closet at the beginning of The Ring. That was awesome.
So she's very cute. Thank you again to Blue Birdie.
Yes. I also believe we should have an updated link. We should have an updated command. At least on Twitch, I know we do. Producer Rick will double check to make sure we've got an updated command where you can go reserve your Hootsie today. I believe they're going to start producing them right after the campaign closes. It'll run for another 20-something days. It was a total of 3 weeks, and we're under there now, so we're probably up in upper teens now for days left. So go check that out. If we would greatly appreciate it if you would bring your own Hootsie home and support us. We appreciate it. And also, she's adorable. She's perfect. So thank you for showing that, guys. We appreciate it. The next best way to support us is the Patreon, which is awesome because you get a lot of really great stuff in return. By becoming a patron, you get to view a few Patreon exclusive campaigns that you can only see over there. And also I've been doing a Drive to D&D vlog that's been going pretty well as well. That's been a lot of fun. Also today I updated the Patreon post with a new questions post. So if you have questions for any of the 3 sessions that we have this week, either tonight for Neon Nights, Wednesday for Once Upon a Witchlight, or Friday for Icebound, you can go to the post right now. You can put the campaign title before your question, and then we will make sure we read as many of those live as possible, as is one of your Patreon perks. So go ask your questions right now. Don't hesitate. And then lastly, Mike, what's the single best way that they can possibly support us?
The single best way, I gotta hear Nikki take this away from me. I'm blown away at the quality of that, folks. I am blown away. It is well worth $29.99. Speaking of more than $29.99, actually less than $29.99, for $1, you can become a VIP for the Crooked Moon. Our forthcoming Kickstarter, as I'm gonna close my laptop because I'm getting apparently babooping. The Crooked Moon is our forthcoming Kickstarter campaign. It is a folk horror supplement for 5th edition. It is a full adventure from levels 1 to 13, which I realized a lot of Kickstarter campaigns and projects do not include a very large adventure. So, that's a pretty big deal is what I'll say. I'm going to try to silence my laptop here.
You can turn it off.
Yeah, that's true. I think Richie's messaging the Discord, and it is booping. The best way to support us is by becoming a VIP for the Kickstarter and then eventually backing the campaign. It is a setting guide. It is an adventure levels 1 to 13. It is a ton of player options, 13 subclasses, 13 races, 26 epic upgrading artifacts.
That's right.
We got at least 65 monsters. That are all very based on they'll have their own folklore where you can learn mysteries about it. And the campaign is going to have a shit ton of amazing add-ons. If you join the VIP program, you'll get an invite to the VIP Discord, and we just did round 2 of our tiers, offerings, add-ons, and pricings after getting feedback from the community. So we are listening to the VIPs. Your voice can be heard, and I would think that all the VIPs will probably hear that, can attest that we are listening to feedback and we are making changes and adjusting accordingly. And so really it's the best way to support us. It's the biggest thing we've ever done as a group, and we would love for this to be a massive success, and you guys can help us. Tarot deck, bunch of dice, 3 plushies, 11 boss miniatures, dice bag.
A lot of good stuff.
Ton of shit.
We got a finished piece of art, and I won't say what it was, but we got a finished piece of art today that is so fucking good.
It might be the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
It's so
I'll
good.
tell, because they've seen this piece. They've seen the sketch piece. So you guys have seen if you're in the VIP, the sketch of the DM screen, and that's his sketch. We're working with Xavier Collette, who's literally a god on Earth. And we received the final today, and I think I was telling Richie and Andy while we were in the green room. That's what people are, before the call. Green room, so fucking pretentious. is that I think it's the coolest thing we've ever done as a group is getting that DM screen art produced.
It is unreal. It's unreal.
Yeah.
I will
All
be
the
using
little
that DM
details.
screen.
Yeah.
So, long story short, if you're interested in becoming a VIP, there's a lot of really awesome stuff you get in return. Go do that. Go to thecrookedmoon.com, and then you can fill out the form there to become a VIP today. And then you get to see all of this awesome stuff that we're talking about, including all of the extra stuff that you get you get to be privy to a lot of stuff ahead of time. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. I echo everything he says. It's the biggest thing we've ever done as a group, and we just appreciate all of your support.
They
So
call
thank
me
you.
King Shill. I'm happy to do it.
That's right. Or what, Shill Miser? What are we calling it?
The Shill Miser.
The Shill Miser. And then, of course, make sure you join our Discord, which is another great place for lots of information, and especially to hang out with us in between streams and hang out with the amazing community that we've built over the last 6 years. For all of our socials, like our Twitch, our TikTok, our podcast, make sure you go to strodcast.com. That's strodcast.com. And then tonight and during all episodes of Neon Night streams, we will not be doing Twist of Fate. Instead of 500 bits, you can ask us a question with a super chat of $5 or more, and we will answer that question live here on stream. Think about it like calling into a radio station. For upcoming schedules, all of our streamed content, like campaigns, will take place over on our Twitch channel, anything that isn't Neon Nights. And make sure you tune in over there every Wednesday for Once Upon a Witchlight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The next chapter of Icebound is this Friday, September 8th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And then, of course, the next episodes of Stardust Rhapsody will be September 16th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And then, we got Neon Nights here every Monday, 8:30 p.m. Don't miss it. As far as special announcements goes, if you decide to become a member here on on YouTube, you get access to a bunch of really awesome emotes. We are working on unlocking more emote slots for getting all of our Twitch emotes over here. But you get to enjoy the ones that we do have unlocked now. Outside of that, are there any other special announcements, or should I jump right into the YouTube intro?
I don't know if you mentioned this at the plushie, but we have sold 919
I did not mention the number.
We are so close.
We are so close to 1,000, and 1,000 is actually a huge number for Makeship. So when we hit it, it will be very good for all people involved. So help us get to 1,000 plushies.
Tell your friends. Tell your family. Tell your dog.
Awesome. Okay. I will do the YouTube intro then, and we can jump right into it. First, just wanted to give a shout out to Sal Money, who with the $5 super chat. We really appreciate it. No question. He's just letting us know that the mods are trapped in Ohio and that they need help.
Call on Glump Shitto.
Thank you for the support. We appreciate it, Sal. Thank you so much. Okay, here we go. YouTube intro. Let me make sure I'm in frame here and I look reasonable. Okay. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Neon Nights and Avantris Talk Show. We would absolutely love it if you could like this video, subscribe to our channel, and check that bell so you never miss an episode. Tonight's topic of discussion is First Time DM Survival Guide Part 3. That's right. Part 3. So be sure to leave a comment below, let us know what you think about this new talk show segment, and suggest future topics that you would love to hear about. If you're looking to further support us, the best way you could do that is by checking out our Patreon. Go check out our merch shop and become a VIP for our very first Kickstarter, The Crooked Moon, over on thecrookedmoon.com. We would love your support. So, gas up your Corvette, tune into your favorite synthwave station, and cruise with us as we enjoy another one of these beautiful neon nights. Thank you. All right, time to jump right in. We're talking more first-time DMing because it turns out that this is a topic that everybody has a lot to say about, which is amazing. But first, most importantly, we have to do our recap segment, which quite frankly might be my favorite segment, especially after everything that happened last week. We had a pretty spicy session of Once Upon a Witchlight, and I will say that this may contain a little bit more spoilers than normal. We'll try to keep it light. We'll try to keep it light spoilers, but goodness gracious. I don't even know where to begin on the recap, the prediction. I told you we weren't going to have any predictions. There was no way any of us could have predicted what was actually going to happen in that session, and I still am not sure. Maybe you have a prediction. I don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, please tell me what you think. Give me a little thoughts on the last session.
We didn't go back in time.
No, but I do want to commend you. I thought that was an absolutely unbelievable guess, and my hat is off to you quite literally in this moment. I thought that was a fantastic prediction.
But it was still related to time. So we actually did kind of go back in time in that we saw visions of the past. So I'm still going to take that as a W.
I think that's fair. I
also think that's fair.
The last session was amazing. I can't go through a combat without getting absolutely fucking dumpster fucked, though. So I'm the Lethica of this campaign. So
that's fair.
Gricko is the Lethica of Once Upon a Witchlight, and so I got to figure out how to not do that or be that anymore. But it was still great to see combat. Very fun fight. My favorite part was that everyone who watched Prime was very handsomely rewarded. And it's for the ones where it was I think it was an absolute banger. If you've never seen Prime, you don't need to have watched a single lick of Prime for that to have been a fucking banger episode. But that for the people that did watch Prime, that you were handsomely rewarded. It was like you want a crumb of Avantris cinematic universe or Avantris narrative universe, you got a fucking deluge, and that was fucking amazing. So that was my favorite.
Well said.
That was going to be my comment as well, is that walking into it, I didn't see it coming at all. And it was a complete surprise. And all of a sudden I realized we weren't playing the session that was right in front of us, as immediate and rewarding as it was. But we were playing chess on a board that is larger than many or all of our stories. And all of a sudden it went. It was boggling. I was frankly shocked into silence by it. It was great.
Well said, Nikki. I know you can't really give any predictions because you are pulling the strings or puppeting the marionette, should I say? But were you particularly excited for this episode over others, or do you just kind of have the same level of excitement for all of the episodes that you DM?
I was excited for this one because I feel like my favorite sessions are the lore drop sessions. So as much fun as you guys being chempestries and, going through forests and meeting fun creatures and doing little things is, it's the sessions where you get a lot of information and I can start seeing the way that you are taking that information and theory crafting with it and how you're handling the information that you're given that allows me to do more with the next sessions that come up. And so that's always just so fun for me. And anytime you do the face, that's my favorite.
Yeah, I was absolutely.
Or the grabbing someone and
stunned.
shaking them. That's
it's a miracle I didn't beat up Mike.
I also think that it's my favorite, even though I'm a player here as the DM of Prime. Obviously, you don't even care what I think. It's just you and Richie looking at each other, and you're like, "Fuck yourself, Mike." It's literally just you and Richie.
That's fair. Okay, what I'll say, that's true, and I think it's because I feel like I can't look at you because one, you won't give anything away anyway, and two, you're like,
you're not really in Prime.
Yeah, you're the arbiter, you're the story, conductor, right? And like, Kelsey wasn't there, and Derek was only in Prime for a little bit, and Nikki's DMing, and Mace wasn't in Prime at all, and so it's like I only had Rich there to really be like, holy shit.
You're gonna look over at Mikey, and he's gonna be doing the Jack Nicholson, like, yeah.
I'll take another favorite part and a theory. Is I think that it's really cool that we learned the origins of the Hourglass Coven.
Yes.
Spoilers.
Yes.
And I know that Nikki had mentioned that that's not at all in the book. There's no origins given. There's no backstory given for the Hourglass Coven in the book. That's entirely bespoke to Avantris. And so I think that was really fucking cool and added a lot of depth and characterization that I think is very fun, that makes them not just, they're just a bunch of creepy, angry, gross hags. And I like that a lot. And there are a lot of the importance of the difference between witches and hags and Avantris is kind of been a topic that we have addressed in several campaigns. And it was very cool. This is the first time we've ever shown we had the birth of a hag in Prime, but before the stream. But we've never seen
right.
Okay, how does like an original, how's one way and a hag might be born? Like, is there a connection to mortals? And that was really cool.
To kind of jump off of what Mike said, that was probably my favorite part about the session was the backstories for the hags. One, because I like doing horror. That's the zone where I feel the most comfortable is when I'm doing, don't let me into my zone, where I'm doing the spooky, creepy stuff. I don't know why my brain is like that, but the moment that stuff's happening, I picture it more clearly than everything else. And so it's a lot more fun for me to DM. But because I noticed when you first met Bavlorna that it was difficult to want to kill her, really, because you didn't have reason to. Outside of the fact that you knew she was a no good big bad, outside of that, it's like, well, she's helping you, and so far she's pleasant, so what?
She's got all these creative interests, right?
She made us cookies.
And so, yeah, she's creepy and weird, but who cares? And so from that point, I did start thinking a lot about what was it that made Stradania my favorite villain of all time. And that was because she was a villain that had an origin story. You knew where she went wrong, and you also knew what she had done that was awful. Now, with Stradania, she was a redemptive villain. As awful as she was, she needed to die, but there was still that sadness of like, man, a lot of that was that wasn't her fault. And so when working on the backstories for the hags, my biggest thing was, yes, I want something awful to have happened to them to justify why they went down that path, but the choices that they made had to be heinous so that they don't have redemption. These are not redemptive villains. Right. These are horrible, awful people that, yes, had terrible things happen to them, but the choice that they made because of that shows that they deserved what they got, which is why when you had the prompt, it was, tell a story of your past and how you overcame it, because the entire part about that was to show that you're not like the hags. You didn't let the horrors of your past lead you down a path of villainy, but instead a path of heroism. And that's how you move forward.
Well said.
And so that was
said
for me.
What I will follow up with, just real quick before you move on, I've been planning since the beginning of Neon Nights. We're deep into this talk show. I've been planning on doing a series of episodes on villains. So when you're ready, Nikki, if you need a break next week or you're not ready to come back yet, whenever you're ready to come back, you let me know, and we'll start doing a 2 or 3 parter on villains, because I know that we could probably talk about that for a month or more.
I love villains. I love them.
I think it's also good, and this is maybe we can this is a good segue into the DMing, but when it comes to villains, this is a point that I'll say. There's actually a great video that there's a YouTuber that I like called The Closer Look, and actually just did a great video on how you not every single villain needs to be sympathetic. And it's a critique of kind of like the new Disney thing of every fucking villain needs to be sympathetic and be recontextualized of why it's so tragic. And it's like, no, it's okay to have a deliciously evil villain who just likes being evil. I just watched Puss in Boots: The Last Wish last night, and it was fucking awesome. And they had the villain in Jack Horner, Big Jack Horner, who's voiced by John Mulaney. And he was great. And he just loved being evil. He was completely despicable. He doesn't learn anything at the end. And it was perfect. And you don't need to have a villain who, where everyone cries. I mean, I like Steven Universe as much as the next guy, but where everybody sings a song and cries and becomes best friends, right? That, it's okay to have irredeemably evil villains. So
Right. Yeah, well said. Well said. No, that's awesome. Last question for the recap is: do we have anything that we think we can predict without being overly spoilery, or should we skip predictions and not even worry about it?
I think we got it, yeah.
I have
All
an
right.
idea of what's going to happen on Wednesday.
Yeah, I bet you do.
Yeah, I do. I think I might know what's going to happen on Wednesday. I
Yeah.
think I know what's behind those doors.
Okay. All right. Well, then in that case, we're all keeping our lips sealed. We're not going to make any predictions, and we're moving on. All I gotta say is that if you're not caught up on Witchlight, get caught up on Witchlight. Join us on Wednesday. It is gonna be unbelievable. And then next Neon Ice, we'll also get to talk about Icebound 2, which is always a lot of fun. I like doing those recaps once a month too. So get caught up. Don't miss it. Anyway, next I wanted to shout out Apple Carly. Thank you so much for the $10 super chat. We really appreciate it. She wished us a good weekend and hope that we had a wondrous week. So thank you very much. We appreciate the support. We appreciate it. Just as a reminder, if you want to ask questions regarding tonight's topic, you can with a super chat of $5 or more. Or if you're a patron, you can go leave your questions on the Patreon posts online. We're getting into first-time DMing. This is our third week talking about first-time DMing. We covered a lot of the prerequisites. We talked a lot about, the stuff you do about setting up your campaign with, what kind of classes are you going to put restrictions on your players with races and classes and all sorts of stuff, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. There's going to be a little bit of overlap. I think we might do a little bit of overlap here, but basically we didn't really get too far into the idea of actually sitting down to DM for your first session. We talked a lot about the prereqs. We talked a lot about what it was to gear up into this point. But we had a couple of really great feedback points in the Discord over the week that I put in here, and one of the things that we talk a lot about, and here I'll just give you kind of a quick overview so that way if there's something that comes to your mind, we'll get to it. One of the things I want to talk about is prep. One of the things I want to talk about is pacing. One of the things I want to talk about is combat. So those will be the three kind of first big major things we're going to hit on. And we can kind of, talk about it. Because I know that as DMs, you have all really refined your prep session, right? The way that you prep, right? We've talked about this a little bit before in previous episodes and in Hangouts and things. But when it comes to your very first session ever, what would be the advice that you would give after all of these years of experience of how much should you actually prepare for your first session? And I know that's going to look very different compared to what you did used to prepare for your first session and how you prepare now. But just talk a little bit about what would be the best advice you would give to a first-time DM for because everybody's going to want to over-prepare, right? I mean, obviously.
I think if you're going to over-prepare for one session, let it be the first.
Okay.
The first session is the one, out of all the sessions, the DM is going to drive the most. Because you don't have the session before for the players to jump on and drive themselves. And so as a DM, you do have to be ready to facilitate the majority of the session. And that could be in the forms of NPCs or puzzles, riddles, whatever it is, dungeons that you're trying to do. But I think for the first session, if you're going to over-prepare for any of them, I would suggest that one.
Fair point.
Depending on how long your session's going to be or how in-depth the first session's going to be, that's going to determine how much you need to prepare. And I would say for the first session, keep the amount of things you want them to get done light, and allow it to be an opportunity. Like maybe have one big thing that they do that will facilitate a lot of conversation between them. Mm-hmm. Sometimes doing a significant lore drop session 1 is great because it gives them something to sink their teeth into and move forward. So that's...
I would say, as far as the lore drop, it should be something that is relevant to the story that they're doing, rather than saying, memorize the history of the good kingdom, good King Schmargle.
In Witchlight, it was the fairy whose wings had been removed.
Oh, yeah. So
yes.
A major narrative moment was exactly what I was going to say. I love to treat the first session of a campaign as the pilot of a TV show. And that's my secret weapon. That's the secret Big Mac sauce, which doesn't have ketchup in it, apparently. That's like the whole thing. Like nobody...
It does.
The secret sauce. It does not have ketchup. Everyone thinks it does, but it doesn't.
No, it's Thousand
It
Island.
does.
And
no, here we go.
But basically prepare it as the pilot of a show. And basically treat it almost like a one-shot. where it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then end with a really exciting cliffhanger narrative moment that is so thrilling and exciting or dramatic or whatever it is that your players love that they're going to want to come back and play again.
Yeah.
And so that to me is like the best way, and that you think about the pilot of any kind of TV show. They're not like focusing on like all of the backstory and the history. You're learning who the characters are. They're learning about the setting. You're learning about the early antagonists, right? And then there's usually the party comes together, or they're already together, and then they have a quick adventure and then a tease for something more. That's all you need. So that's my pitch.
I think that having an outline really, really helps. Just like what Mike and Nick have been saying is you want to have a narrative moment. You want to have the important moments that Mikey just mentioned. Having those in a general order is extremely important. I highly recommend having something that for the first 15 minutes, and this is true for experienced DMs or the first time you're ever DMing, having something that engages players quickly in two ways. Who are you? Why is this going to be fun? Let's start combat.
Right.
And who are you is getting everyone to immediately start sharing. Maybe the prompt is just as simple as tell me what you look like. What would be my first impression of you? What's your race? What's your class? The bread and butter stuff, right? Or it could be a prompt that's mapped to that narrative moment. That's going to be thematic. That's going to attach to those larger pieces. You could do it that way. There are a million and one ways, but have a short blurb, ask the players to engage, give them inspiration for any response that they could have, and then immediately dive into combat. Start the adventure off in combat. And the reason why is this, is because if you are DMing for the first time, you don't realize how long combat is going to take. You might not have all the rules mastered and memorized. You aren't going to know all of the different features and everything. You want to throw some nice, easy, edible meat on the table for the players, because all of a sudden time is going to do this. All of a sudden, we're going to walk through. Oh, we need to do initiative now. You're going to suddenly go, oh God, I have to track initiative. What did you get? 18? Okay, I guess you're here. Oh, you got 23. Oh shit. Okay, so that means all of a sudden you're going to have to walk through that, and then it's going to be their turn, and then you're going to have to run a monster, and you're going to flip to the monster stat block, and you're going to go, oh, okay, this is how the monster works. Keep it simple. Run the combat, and an hour is going to fly by.
Yeah.
By the time that hour is done, everyone's had a moment to share in the spotlight, and because combat works the way that it does, you share in that spotlight. Everyone knows, like, oh, my turn is over. I can rest. Unless something happens, I can just vaguely pay attention until it's my turn again. And then when it's my turn, I get to say what I want to say in the way that I want to say it and be the character. By the time combat is over, they will be a cohesive unit. You won't be thinking about your nerves at all. You guys will have had that dialogue that Dungeons and Dragons require, where it's a combination of flavor and a combination of rules and a combination of narrative and getting everything all together. And then all of a sudden, initiative will be over. There will be a moment where you can transition into the story. That's when you can start to drive. Don't leave your combat for the middle. Don't leave your combat for the end. Maybe have ideas prepared, especially depending on how long you have. But starting with combat is a really, really nice way to walk into the pool from the shallow end first.
Yeah, I think those are really good tips, and like I said, we'll dive into combat a bit more, especially running your first combat, because I know, Derek, you're going to have a lot of points for that as well. And I know, like I said, I know this is something we've discussed about a little bit, but because it's so appropriate for the topic, I would really love it if everybody could kind of dive in a little bit more about how their prep has changed over the years. I know that Derek recently had a big breakthrough, right? And with Icebound and things like that. And so kind of give, our first time DMs, give them a little insight into the evolution of what DM prep has looked like for each of you, because I know that you all do it a little differently based on the cadence of the campaigns that you run and things like that.
I have to jump in right away. You know that meme where there's the bell curve?
Yes.
And there's a person who's saying something stupid, and it's like the beginner thing. And then there's that person up here who's saying the medium on their way to expert, and then the expert person is saying exactly the same thing that the stupid beginner's saying.
Yes.
that's my journey when it comes to prep. Was I thought I would just create an outline, it would be on one page, and I would be done. I just thought, oh yeah, I'll be able to make up the rest. And there were so many times on the way up that bell curve where I got flustered and I lost the plot and I made a mistake and the whole thing. So every time that happened, I would ratchet up the prep. I would ratchet up the prep. I need more detail. I need more ammunition. I need more subsystems and all of these things. And I reach around and I tasted and tried all those things. And at the end of the day, sliding into home base, all I need is that outline. Because I tried and failed at all those things. So what I would equip you with as a first-time DM is start somewhere in that middle. Know that you are going to have to climb that mountain and end up on the other side. And when you are on the other side, the prep that is right for you is the prep that is only right for you. Your prep would not work for me. My prep would not work for you. You have to find your own balance. But starting off with something in the giving yourself blank spaces to improvise with and lore about your world and narrative moments. Nikki said it in one sentence. The best session to over prepare for is your first session. Do it all and mess up, and then you'll find out what's right for you.
What I will say is what you're describing, not only are you describing that bell curve, to me it sounds like you're describing the Matrix, where Neo and Morpheus are talking, and Neo says, what are you trying to tell me, that I can dodge bullets? And then Morpheus says, no, Neo, I'm trying to tell you that when you're ready, you won't have to, right? It's very much in line with that, I feel.
It's a good scene.
For me, I used to have a bag next to the DM table that was filled with a bunch of loose notes and cards with a bunch of things written on them, and every time I would go to do a session, I'm rummaging through this bag trying to find, well, where was that one page that had all that information, and where's the card with all of the potential NPC names, and where is the card with all of the different types of places in this town. And it was exhausting, and it was disorganized, and it made my job harder. Now I sit down at the table, and if it's a big session that's really important and needs like big narrative beats and things like that, I have a Google Doc that'll have that information, and I have it color coded. So like things are green if I need to read them out. Things are yellow if they have saves. Things are purple if it is an important loot item that they need, that I hope that they get or that is there. And it is red if it is a combat encounter, so that as I'm scrolling through, I can just see really quickly what's coming up and I know the colors. Outside of that, I have one sheet of paper, well, normally two sheets of paper, one blank sheet that is, if we have combat, it's just where I tally maths. And then the other one is a sheet of paper that simply has, from the start of the session to the end of the session, bullet points of everything that's going to happen, and then off to the side I put important names or important lore things or anything else that is, I need to make sure that if they ask me and my mind blanks, I can quickly glance down and be like, that was the thing. That's it.
For me, I kind of went through a similar bell curve adventure as Derek, where, I look at Beneath Dark Wings. And I tried to prepare in the beginning the same way that I prepared for Prime at the time. Prime at the time is a party of avatars, basically, who was basically like, hey, Mikey, fast forward to the next plot point, please. Next. So I needed to have basically a full, robust, rich narrative experience, fully driven by me, fully dictated, and that was a level of prep that was fucking insane for any other campaign, I realized. But I had to learn. I felt like I was struggling, spending days prepping right for Beneath Dark Wings. And I'm like, oh my God, like this, like it's not feeling, like this isn't feeling right to me. And I swear to God, I did not, in my opinion, hit the, like, Beneath Dark Wings gets really good, but it takes a bit to get there, in my opinion. And it gets really, really good when I started prepping the day of the session. Where I basically know I think about what's coming in the story, and I'm like, okay, well, what are the moving pieces? What are the story? What are the important things? And I'm like, okay, thinking about it, I'm letting it ruminate. You're letting it kind of bask, and it's like an 8-hour session, right? And then I wake up at 8 a.m. the day of, we play it too, and I just prep during that, And that's it. And to me, that forced me to basically think about each session as its own chapter in a story, rather than saying, here's all the things that are happening, here's the broader narrative, we get through what we get through. No. This is the session content, and this is what happens at the beginning, this is what happens in the middle, this is what happens at the end. And it made it, in my opinion, so much better and allowed a lot more room for the characters to thrive and to drive the action. So that was very much a journey for me of where I had to learn. Granted, also, it was dozens, hundreds of hours more experience as well.
I want to latch on to what you were talking about, the if we get through what we get through comment, because this is an important thing about prep that I learned that I wish I'd started doing earlier. Meaning I had an expectation of where that start and finish was going to be. You can control the start, but players might spend 1 minute talking about a decision and then make it and be on to the next thing, or they might spend an hour talking about that next thing and be on to the next thing. And we're going to talk about pacing in a minute, yes. But I will say, in terms of prepping for pacing is healthy and good. And that can look like having an outline. It can look like going the other way and having all the way down to the number of chickens in the chicken coop and how many eggs they all laid, level of detail and specificity when it comes to stocking the shelves of the town that you just invented. Having exit ramps early and frequent will mean that if you're halfway through and it's 11:30 and everyone's Uber is about to arrive, you have a way to end things satisfactorily and keep things feeling exciting instead of, oh wow, we're gonna have to call it now. We're gonna have to call it now. You want, I imagine, as a first-time DM and as a 1,000-time DM, you want the session to end and everyone go, oh, I can't wait to play next. I can't wait to play again. I can't wait to run this adventure again. Everyone's excited and swirled up. I think that's generally, very commonly a goal for most people who play Dungeons and Dragons. And if you want that, thinking about natural breaking points in your prep when it comes to the outline of the story you're thinking of is going to be a healthy way to inhabit the DM chair when you're actually running the session.
Well said. Before we jump into pacing, I have kind of a short detour question that I think kind of sets up, another angle of pacing. And this is obviously, I think, a question that you'd want to have with your players, right? Potentially before you start playing. But as a DM, how do you decide whether or not you're going to go for a long form campaign versus something that might only be 4 to 10 sessions? Do you have any advice for our first time DMs at home who might not know how much of a large bite they want to take, right? There might be some DMs that are like, I want to do something like Prime, where it's going to be, hundreds of episodes and blah blah blah. Or you might want to start with a short 4 to 10 story arc, right? 4 to 10 episode arc. What would you say to first time DMs there?
I would say. I would say do as I say, not as I do, for me. Where I went into, and it'll vary depending on how much D&D you can play, but I built Prime and Beneath Dark Wings as these broad, sweeping narratives with multiple arcs, with all these different themes and all these intricate and long, slow burning and massive megaton payoffs. And that's really good, but it requires a fuck ton of D&D, more than any fucking most humans on the planet can play. Where we still play D&D more than most humans on the planet, and we still have 2 full arcs to get through to finish the story. I would not recommend doing that.
Sure.
I would recommend starting in the same kind of way that we did with, Curse of Strahdanya, Edge of Midnight, Stardust Rhapsody, where they still may be long campaigns, and they will, but the scope at the outset is narrower. We're not going to go have our tournament arc in fucking Edge of Midnight. We might. But my presumption is we're not going to suddenly go to the high school and then have a fucking tournament. Like, that's not going to happen. We're in spooky Halloween Town, right? And so we're into the campaign setting of Druskenwald, coming this October in the Crooked Moon.
I think scope is so important. I completely agree. if you're doing your first session as a DM, and your expectation is that you are going to tell a 52 session story that's going to be each 4 hours. It's going to be 200 plus hours of playing Dungeons and Dragons, because everyone is going to show up every fucking week, and that's 52 weeks, and they're going to do it for the whole year. You're very lucky, and you might get what you want, but most people do not get that. I would just plan the first session and have seeds that you know might map into that level of epicness. And I would also say, if it's your first session, now is not the time to go to the top of the tallest mountain and be ambitious, be hungry. But can you tell a simple, small story that just happens in a town where some merchant brought in an egg and all of a sudden a white dragon wormling gets hatched? That's a really exciting story for a town that size. Right. They're going to be telling that story for years. And if you can tell that to perfection, you're already on your way to being an expert DM.
The inevitability is the fact that the character, I think this is inevitable, I may be wrong, this is my hot take. Your your players are going to get tired of the first characters that they make. They are going to get tired of playing the first characters, and they are going to want to play new characters, especially once they have the experience under their belt. Yeah. So if you can have a tighter, narrower campaign, where you can kind of have it be quicker, narrower scope, and then you retire those characters, and then they get to bring up more characters, and you don't have to play the same fucking characters for 10 years, that's also something I think will be a big help.
That's a really good call out. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Nikki.
That's okay. I'm going to agree with the guys and say go small. Not necessarily for the other reasons, but because you've never DM'd before and you might not like it. Don't commit yourself to a multi-year campaign and then find yourself 2 months down the line saying, I wish I were a player. So commit yourself to something small, and if you love it, you can always make it bigger. If it ends up being better than you expected and everyone's having a great time, you can always sit down and say, hey, I know we talked about this only going for 10 sessions, but I'm having a blast. I've got some ideas. How are you feeling? Let's make this bigger. It's a lot harder to commit yourself to something larger, get everyone's buy-in, have everyone put on all that effort, hate it, and then have to say, actually, guys, I hate this. Can we stop?
Right.
So, yeah, start small.
That's you and Mike had two sides of the same coin that I think are really, really heads up takes. Because it's obvious when you say it, but I wouldn't have thought about it. That's something that didn't occur to me to even bring up. So both of you, very well said. Before we hop into, Derek, I mean, look, man, you always have good takes, but they had two sides of the coin. This coin doesn't have three sides. It's not some fucked up
Derek,
coin. Okay?
There's a third side.
No,
it can land like this. No, I get 1%.
It's a two-dimensional coin. It doesn't exist when you look at it from anyway.
No, I don't care.
Before we hop into pacing, I do want to answer some questions because we've got some questions and comments. Some people to thank. Sal for becoming a 2-month member. He said, "Welp, I guess I need to scrap Fleeing Flow out of my campaign since we can't do the tournament arc in Druskenwald." So thank you so much for your support. We appreciate it. Crated and Ray both had $5 super chats with no real questions but comments saying they appreciated our content. So thank you so much for your support. We really appreciate it. And then we've got a question from Chloe. Chloe plans to start DMing. Chloe's fear is that their players may start to try to do things that they didn't account for and being caught off guard. How do you deal with your players throwing you a crazy curveball as a DM?
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
There is no avoiding it. There is no preparing for it. It will happen. It is okay to say, I wasn't expecting that. Why don't we take a coffee break? And I'm going to think about how to tackle this. Especially if you're not playing on camera like we are. And we still do that. Like, the amount of times someone's been like, legend lore, clairvoyance. And the DMs had to be like, you do your own thing. I need 10 minutes here to figure out what I'm doing. It is okay to ask for a break to figure out what you want to do.
And especially if you're not, doing it live, in front of an audience, and you're doing the all day things like we used to do when we first started playing D&D. We get together and play all day. We'll take a 2-hour dinner break or a 2-hour lunch break or something. and then like work on it and think about it for in that period.
Yeah.
If you do not want to take a break, I have two options for you. I have two. I think the two things I would recommend, and they're both kind of they're opposites, I would say. The first is basically rather than thinking about what you need to account for and thinking about the specifics and the things that need to happen, learn your setting, learn the characters, learn the theme of the adventure and the kind of creatures that are there, the kind of people that are there, have some characters. And then no matter what they do, you will effectively always be prepared to improvise. And that was what I learned from fucking Root of all things.
Wow.
I had to over prep until I learned Root, where I'm like, I know the clearings. I know the theme of the clearings. I know what the political fucking system is. I know what faction controls each thing. I know what the factions are about. I know what the kind of denizens are. You know, are they foxes? Are they rabbits? Are they mice? What does that mean? I know that, and the players don't need to know all that shit, but I do.
Right.
So no matter what they do, I can improvise and pull something out of my ass, no matter what. So if you learn basically the how,
Rich, they can hear you typing,
and the why instead of the what, you'll be solid. The other answer that I have, and this is a hot take, fucking railroad them. You heard it. You have permission from the creator of Avantris to fucking railroad your party. And I said it. I fucking said it. Where if there is if you have built a campaign where it is narratively compelling, and they're like, you know what, that fucking that horrible lich doing his evil deeds sounds like it's very thematically compelling, but let's go buy a vineyard. That vineyard looks really nice. Let's go buy it and like open up a tavern. Burn the fucking vineyard down and have the lich come in and drop a nuke on it and fucking railroad your players. Because at the end of the day, there is no reason why, especially as you're getting started, and as long as you dress it up, the key to railroading is not to not do it. The key to railroading is dressing it up in a beautiful package where the party doesn't know that they're being railroaded. That's what I do. I say I don't breadcrumb. I wheel in wheelbarrows of red fucking meat, and I slab it down in front of the party, and they will, if they care about narrative, and characters are acting remotely sane, they are going to pick up those story beats. And so all you need to do is just dress it up in a way where it would be absolutely nonsensical. They would have to be actively sabotaging your story to not choose it. And then if they do sabotage it, have the lich come in and drop a fucking tactical nuke on them. I don't care. Do it.
So that's what I was going to say, is that I think that both of you make really great points, but specifically to Mikey's point, that kind of goes back to a lot of the stuff we talked about in the first episode, where it's like you have this communication between player DM and you set expectations, right? What is everybody hoping to get out of this game? I would certainly hope that as a first-time DM, you wouldn't have a player in your party that's actively looking to disrupt your story, that isn't actively looking to work against what you're trying to do, right? And then that would obviously be a clashing of values, and that's a no-go. That's a non-starter, in my opinion.
There are a couple ways that can creep up, that you can get surprised in Dungeons and Dragons. And to exactly Mikey's point is let it happen and figure out how to weave it into the narrative. If you know what your theme is, if you know what you're doing, this is more, I think, 201 than 101 DMing. But if you have some of those skills, you can, letting it happen the first time is actually very free. But the other time that it can surprise you is like, oh, they go somewhere that they shouldn't have gone. I didn't write that town, and they're like, you know what? Let's go down the left path, and we're gonna show up at the town. And all of a sudden, you're scrambling because you're like, I had plans, I didn't have time to prep. All of a sudden, you feel like you're at a loss for content. That can be scary. If you find yourself in those kinds of positions, I completely agree with Mikey. Finding a way to slow things down. You are the controller of time and space itself in many ways. And you are find some way to get in between those decisions. Another good example is them taking out an NPC that you thought was going to deliver some important lore drop or piece of information, and someone goes, you know what? I don't like this guy. I shoot him in the heart with an arrow. Player agency isn't something that you want to take away, so that's part of the prep factor, is thinking around those corners, thinking about like, well, what if they kill the king? What if they do all those things? Occasionally thinking about those edge cases can be very healthy, and I still get surprised at the table because players are creative and there's more of them than there are of you. That's part of the fun of the game, is frankly learning how to Bruce Lee those kinds of decisions and moments and figuring out how to deliver satisfying encounters and experiences in return.
I do think I want to compliment all three of you, and Mace as well, even though he's not here, that I believe that all of our DMs and players alike have become masters of yes end. We've talked about yes end, right? We also talk about no but, right? Which is the flip side of the yes and. And I think that maybe those are tools that you can use when your players throw you, curveballs here and there where you either yes and them or you no but them. I just wanted to compliment all of you on how much, I've watched us all kind of grow as yes and people, but especially our DMs who have to deal with the crazy things that our players come up with. So well done, all of you.
Thank you, Andy. I feel like no is acceptable in some situations. Not no but just no.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I mean,
I gave you one of the hardest no's I've ever given as a DM at the end of the Mighty Trumps.
Yeah, but that was hilarious, and it wouldn't have worked any other way.
It had to be a no.
Well said. We'll answer a few more questions from excuse me, guys. My brain is absolutely mush tonight. My mouth isn't working. We'll answer a few more questions from some of our Patreon users before we get to pacing. I just feel like, yes, patrons. What did I say? Did I not say that?
No, I'm saying thank you, patrons. That's all.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm really struggling tonight, guys. I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on.
You're all right.
I hope I don't have a brain worm. We have a question from Carly. What's it like creating your own homebrew world? Talk a little bit about, briefly about what it feels like or how it's been doing your own homebrew thing, Mike, especially creating Avantris, and then Nikki and Derek, being able to add on to it in your own ways.
I've talked a lot about this with the people on this call and beyond, and this is, where, Mace learned from the best. And I think that this is kind of what I instilled upon him, so I think he'd agree, is where the setting of, in my opinion, and there's a lot of DMs that don't do this, and that's totally fine and very valid, where as a setting, I went about it creating Avantris not to have 8,000 years of history and every single corner of the map filled out and all sorts of lore and basically things to show off to my players. I call it the tyranny of the concept qua concept. Hey, I thought of this really cool, fantastical thing. I'm gonna shove it in my world, and I'm gonna put a fucking spotlight on it and say, hey players, look at this cool thing I thought up. A lot of DMs do that. That is the easiest trap. Actually, that's my first advice. Everything else that I said, this is step one. What I'm saying right now is avoid the tyranny of the concept qua concept of, look at the cool thing I thought of. Hey, care about it, please. Look at it. Care about it. Please. Because if it's not inside the story, they're not going to care. They're going to be bored. You're going to be offended and hurt. And no one's going to have a good time.
But Mikey, my world is a god staring into a mirror that is shattering in slow motion. It will take millennia for the pieces to finally disappear into particles. And in the meanwhile, each piece of that broken mirror represents a different universe, a different world. And my players are going to be jumping from mirror shard to mirror shard as it is collapsing, trying to reassemble the mirror.
I don't know. That sounds pretty badass, actually.
That actually sounds kind of cool. But
you want to do that?
Well, you needed to basically build it up into a story, right?
No, I need to earn it, right?
You need to earn it. And so all of the, oh, wow, that's neat is earned through narrative instead of, hey, look at the thing that I thought of. So going back to basically building a world, I I think that kind of the theme, the mission of Avantris is to provide a toolbox, a toy box for DMs to use to run an adventure of a game of heroic fantasy with whatever kind, to allow the players to live whatever kind of fantasy they may want to live. So if you want to have an Old West campaign, you want to have a Gothic horror campaign, you want to have a pirate campaign, you want to have, a city an urban campaign, you want to have, as long as it's not like fucking like, modern, like near future shit, right? As long as it somewhat technologically isn't completely absurd and more modern day, then Avantris exists to provide those themes, to tell those stories, to have those games of fantasy, to live out those types of fantasy that you want to live out. So that's my overall philosophy about building a setting.
Nice.
Welcome, traveler. From what mirror shard do you...
Stop.
Oh, Mirror Quadrant 479. That's the quadrant.
I've done world building for my own personal setting, which I don't run anymore because I run Avantris. And I am very much, and exactly to your point, Andy, in the same seat as Nikki, where I have been able to do substantial world building, but through a lens as part of a choir, rather than being the godhead of world building. And it's extremely satisfying. I love that I have a little part of my world that is Drakkar, and that when it comes to Icebound or any future campaign, that there is room enough for me to really, really dig into the ideas that I want to and still feel extremely nourished and rewarded as a creator, without having to worry about origin stories that have been decided long ago for me. And I think that that's a promise that anyone who engages with the established settings that existed 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, can find satisfying results from. I would encourage anyone to go and look at those settings and ask themselves why and what for. There's nothing wrong with saying, I'm going to do Forgotten Realms. I'm going to do Eberron. I'm going to do, why can't I remember the Magic the Gathering setting? Tal'Dorei. I'm going to contribute my voice to this, and I'm going to own it, and I'm going to make sure it feels like a part of that choir. That's an extremely satisfying thing narratively, and it takes a lot of the DM burden off of, your shoulders if you are a first-time DM. Sorry, Nikki, I feel like you have a lot to say, and I just had to jump in.
No, I'm okay.
You good?
I'm just listening. I have one thing to say, but it's really already what Mike said, and my thoughts on it are, if you spend all of your time building this world and you know every little thing about it, you leave little room for your players to have an impact on that world. And D&D is collaborative storytelling. You should have blank spaces. You should have swaths of land that have no villages on them yet, because your players will create them. Your players will find ways to go places you hadn't thought of, or to inspire you to add new things. And D&D should be ever evolving and ever changing. Like, I'll use an example. Witchlight did not have a nightclub originally at the carnival. There was no drag show.
There was no Gavin and Troy.
They didn't put that in the module.
Trash.
But one of our best episodes was the drag episode and Guys Night, and that wouldn't have been possible if I went with the way the carnival was built out and only stuck to that and didn't allow the ability for things to change and things to appear, or even to take things away that don't suit you. And so I think I say this all the time, but at least for me, the best thing that I started doing as a DM was just learning to be flexible and learning to say, it's okay if I sit down for this session and it doesn't work out the way that I plan, cool. It's going to work out the way it was supposed to. It's going to happen how it's supposed to happen. And you just, like the same way that you roll the die and you trust the numbers, you have to, as a DM, just sit down at the table and trust that you can do it, because you can. And it's scary sometimes. It kind of goes back to Chloe's question, like, what do you do when your players throw a curveball at you? You can never be prepared for it, but trust that when you're in the moment, something will come to you. I can't think of a single time that I've DM'd where something has happened and I've just been like, I honestly have no way, I have no idea how to deal with that. So you guys just have to do something else because I don't know. Maybe the choice I make isn't going to be the right one, but you'll come up with something. And I think it's the same way with world building. Leave huge swaths of things open. Allow your players to impact your world. Don't think of it as your world. Think of it as our world. And, build something fun with the people that you're playing a game with.
I can say really what you just said in a slightly
example is Edge of Midnight, right? Edge of Midnight is a unique domain where the setting was created to tell the story that it is going to tell. So that we could have a theme of 13 provinces of Duskenwald that basically tap into 13 different vibes of Halloween, folklore, horror, all that stuff. And that's why we decided that we are using the setting in our forthcoming Kickstarter campaign. The Crooked Moon is actually going somewhere.
I knew it.
In our forthcoming Kickstarter campaign, we are talking about Duskenwald broadly, but we are providing an in-depth setting guide for a new land called Wickermore Hollow, which is basically you have all these different themes that are really oozing with these different tropes from Halloween and horror stories. We basically said we need to create one, and the overall vibe is elements of folk horror here and there. But for this adventure, we condensed it. And basically said, here is a condensed valley where you can have the most folk horror fucking adventure you can possibly imagine. And that's what we created, and that's what we're presenting, because that's how we view settings, is that rather than, it needs to be lore accurate to the story, no, it is a tool for you all to run the best folk horror story you possibly can. And that's kind of the little bookend of, and when we, and I'll say, if this Kickstarter campaign is a success, and we do further books and settings, and we bring familiar locations from our stories that we've already done in other products and books, they're going to have the same kind of treatment, where it's going to be presented in a way where we are going to decide on that, figure out that theme, and the setting that is there is going to provide you all of the tools to present that game of heroic fantasy to evoke that theme as strongly as possible.
Well said. Derek.
I'm just going to jump in and say the proudest moments that I've had as a dungeon master were not when I had some super sick delivery of some rigid moment that I pictured in my head going perfectly before a session. That I think that the fantasy of that is very seductive, but it was instead when I chose to be flexible and I amplified the story because of player choices being what it does, and I was able to be graceful in the moment and lift everyone up because of that. Those are the moments that I remember and are most proud of. And the faster as a DM you can start focusing on that and growing that muscle, the happier you're going to be with your stories long term.
Awesome. Really good questions. We appreciate the support and the questions from everybody. I think it's finally time to dive into pacing. And I want to preface this by saying that it's not a science, right? I think it's more of an art. And I think it's something that, is not something that you can really, completely control, right? But you guys have already touched on a little bit that, and I know that Mike had a couple of really good suggestions, and Derek with the off ramps and things like that. So, but talk a little bit about how you would approach pacing for somebody who's never run. Again, this is a first time DM, right? Maybe explain a little bit what pacing means to you, and what pacing means to us may be very different compared to what pacing means for a first time DM.
I want to hear what Mikey says very much on this point, because pacing is still something I struggle with, so I need to hear it. But what I will say is, if you went to Anime USA a few years ago, 1 year ago, when did we do this?
It was last year.
Down,
feels like
down to the minute.
But it was
down to the
year.
minute. People were saying, "I'm going to sign up for a 3-hour session," and I did. I delivered a full session down to the minute.
That's true.
Was it well paced? What did I do? Take shortcuts? And did I just end things abruptly? No one knows. Only I know that secret.
Before I mention, because obviously you passed the hot potato meat. Rich, is there any way to turn up Derek and not have an echo?
I'm having.
I can barely hear him.
Am I quiet for the audience? I could also just be moving my camera.
Richie controls for the audience, and so the problem, you'll probably sound fine to them. To me, though,
he said he could hear himself, so that's why I turned him down.
No. I could hear myself, but I'm good. I don't know about Derek. I mean, everybody else sounds
you
good.
You can't adjust Derek separately? Then Derek, could you turn yourself up?
Zoom isn't like Discord where I can pick hands.
Oh, okay.
That's
I don't know if
true.
you can turn yourself up, Derek. Because I can.
I don't know how to turn myself up on the Zooms.
I just wanted to throw that out there because I'm having a strain.
All right, time out. Hold on. If you'd like to turn yourself up, go to where the little microphone mute button is. There's an arrow, there's an up arrow, and there's audio settings in there. Okay.
I was joking.
Oh, great. Thanks for making me look like an asshole. Anyway,
I'm
Mike,
all the way up. Shit.
Mike, continue.
And I've said this many times before, but I'll say it again because I repeat myself, and that's how education works, right? It's all about repetition. Is pacing is in my opinion, the hardest earned trait for DMing. I think that is something that is one of the hardest earned and longest earned and just requires a lot of reps. It is not a science. It is not something that you can basically plan for. Besides outlining, I mean, outlining does help with pacing, right? And so I guess the way that you plan for it, and I thought about pacing, and I was trying to, as I was preparing for this, and yeah, Andy, I did prepare for this, so, you're welcome.
Thank you. I was going to ask you if you all did your homework, but we're not there yet.
I will let you know if I did my homework when you ask the question. I'm reminded of what the homework was.
Touche.
But what I realize what pacing actually is a simple understanding of narrative and the willingness to just drive as a DM to hit that. And so what good pacing is basically just, is it following a story arc in a way that feels narratively fulfilling and strong? And so you see movies that have terrible pacing. You see books that have great pacing or terrible pacing. And you see all sorts of, I don't know if anyone's watched, a lot of shows these days, if you've seen Ahsoka, the new Star Wars show, right? Where they only have 8 episodes and the pacing is fucking molasses slow. They could have literally covered the first 3 episodes in 1 episode, right? And it's one of those things, and sometimes the pacing is too fast in certain things, and so it's one of those things where it's a failure to understand narrative. That's always what it is. And so if you understand what makes a compelling narrative, what makes a compelling beginning, middle, and end, and then realize that for your broader arc of a story, multiple campaigns, you need multiple beginning, middle, and end episodes, basically, within your overarching story, chapters within a book, acts within a film, right? You need to understand that. So the way that, as I've thought about this, is consuming beautiful media, I think will help, and thinking about why those stories feel so good. Why do those stories feel so well paced to you? And then when you actually start to realize the why and you're consuming it, just like how knowing your world and knowing the characters and the theme will help you improvise it, the more that you just inherently consume good narrative, the more you'll be able to just naturally improvise and do that. And so that's the one thing. And I think that also something I've thought about when it comes to good pacing is having a flair for the dramatic. Is never end your session with, well, you guys want to call it? Is that good? Sure. Okay.
I've done that like a million times.
It's fine, right? But it's one of those things where it's a narrative it's a narrative blue ball. It's a narrative dud. It's a narrative blank that you're fucking shooting, right? And it's you can have any ending at any point of the story, and the way that you word it, if you just word it in a in a dramatic way, you can make it feel like a cliffhanger. You can make it feel like a really dramatic way to end. So always have a flair for the dramatic and a flair for what is the most narratively compelling thing to do in the moment. And suddenly, I think your pacing is going to get just infinitely better over time that more you think about what makes good narrative.
Well, what I will say is, from Cursus Jordania, what I learned about pacing is learn how to read people. Because it's not necessarily about the pacing of the story as much as it is about how the people at the table are handling how quickly or how slowly you're moving through things. If people are getting bored, speed it up.
Yep.
If people are having a great time doing what they're doing, slow it down. Doesn't matter if what they're getting bored with is a huge dramatic thing that you want to draw out because of narrative reasons. If the players aren't into it, cut it. Move along.
Yep.
Move forward.
Brilliant point.
Along with that, if the players are, having a great time but starting to derail and it's getting off topic, then have the ever-present, as you say this, as you do that, interject them, move in with something. As a DM, take control of what's happening to move the story along, because you should be able to feel when things are getting off the rails, or when things are coming to a stop, or when things are working just as they should be. And it is something that you are able to feel after time. But I think for me, the biggest thing has been just observation and just seeing how the players are reacting to the content you're putting down in front of them.
Brilliant points. And I think about expanding upon your point there, Nikki, is where there are times where something feels like when you plan for it, like, man, this is going to be the big thing. Look at the thing that I did. And if your players don't care, that'll be a dud, and that's fine. But then if it's not resonating, feel free to cut it and move on. Rather, don't let the concept look at the cool thing that I did, right? But alternatively, if there's something where we get made fun of a lot for how long it took us to do the carnival in Witchlight, but you think about it, we were interacting, and all of that extra work, all that extra time was all character building. It was all evoking the theme of what we were trying to do. It was building the sense of delirium. It was building the theme of what we were building towards when we went into the Feywild. It was basically heavy foreshadowing, right? And that serves the narrative, right? And so allowing that, if it's like, let's all go, fuck the carnival, no one cares, we're going to fuck the carnival, no one cares, and we're going to basically, there's a difference between kind of just fucking around and just kind of enjoying it, the players enjoying inhabiting the story and the space and the theme.
There's also a difference between session pacing,
Right.
story pacing,
Right.
Yeah.
and campaign pacing.
Absolutely.
So, if you're having a long form campaign, something that you don't, this isn't Curse of Strahd where we know we want to end in a certain amount of sessions, your pacing becomes different. You can be a lot more free. The fact that they get nothing done in Witchlight is not a test, is not indicative of bad pacing. It just, they're having fun. They're doing more things, and as the sessions get further and further in and the stakes get higher and higher, the pacing will change. There will be less time for full sessions of them just doing random wacky things for the sake of it, because what is happening becomes more important. And as a DM, it's your job then to reel that in and make sure that your players are moving along with the story. And so a lot of pacing is juggling those things, the session pacing with the campaign pacing with the narrative pacing. And I still think that all those same rules apply, and it's just paying attention to what your players are doing.
And when it comes actively, if we're at and so maybe this is kind of more 102 instead of 101. We're
That's okay.
if learning what good pacing is something that you also want to learn, my recommendation is I will always recommend this. Go watch Arcane, which in my opinion is one of the greatest works of art that humans have ever achieved. And to me, it's one of the best, if not the best paced work of fiction ever. And it is something that has zero fat, brilliantly paced. And the time that they have, which is a relative little amount of time for a season, is you think about how much is accomplished in that time. And if you want an example of bad pacing, look at almost any Star Wars television show besides Andor. And I'm sorry I keep dumping on Star Wars. That's basically the only TV that I watch anymore. Great pacing is I don't know what's good pacing that's recent. but you know.
Dragon.
What was it?
House of the Dragon.
House of the Dragon pacing it's an amazing
It's
show.
good.
I would say it's not perfect pacing. I think that the pacing needs work. I think that is one of the misses.
There are some episodes that had great pacing,
Yeah.
some that didn't. But once again, that goes back to whether it's, I think the overall pacing of the show was really good. Individual episodes may have had better or worse pacing.
Yeah. So anyway, everything for bad pacing, basically looking at everything that Disney Star Wars has done except for Andor. Terrible pacing, and then I'm sure there's plenty of other examples, but I'm just, yeah. And so and maybe there can be recommendations that the Avantris fam asks for recommendations in the film, TV, music channel as for brilliantly paced stories.
Any final thoughts on pacing or just tips and tricks regarding that?
Let's pretend that I don't know anything about pacing. Let's just pretend, of course I know all of the things that you would ever need to know. But if I didn't, just hypothetically, we're talking about first-time DMs.
Correct.
Mikey, Nikki, if I'm going to err on a side of pacing, should I try to move things along more quickly to get from one thing to the next? Or should I let things happen and intervene when I think that things need to get pushed a little bit? Or should I just totally sit back and wait for players to turn to me and go, now we're done making our decisions and we'd like to move on to the next thing, so we walk from point A to point B?
I think that's where a NPC really serves the party well. Twig has many reasons for being in the campaign. Who knows what those are? But one of the reasons behind Twig could have come and then she could have been an NPC that showed up here and there. But I made the choice to have her go on her first adventure with the party. And the reason behind that was because of what Mike did with an NPC, Dobro, which he didn't do much in our stream of Prime, but was there in the very early days before we streamed. And what his purpose was to facilitate moving the party along so the DM didn't have to do it. Instead, an NPC could do it when it was clear the players weren't getting the clues that you were putting down, which is limiting your pacing, because if the players don't understand what you're trying to give to them, the pacing slows down. So the player or the DM NPC that hangs out with the party has the ability to jump in and notice something the players aren't noticing, or get them talking about where you want the players to go, which can speed up the pacing when it's slowing down. On the flip side, Twig does this too, when the players are getting a little distracted and it's ruining the pacing, that NPC can jump in and narrow their scope and reel them back in and get them back to where they need to be. Or if you need a bit of brevity, that NPC can make the jokes and do the thing. So it's a great way for a new DM to have a little bit of that pacing control without feeling like you have to wait for the players to sit there and go, so, what's next?
To answer your question, Derek, I would say erring on the side of being too quick. Which is why I generally recommend not doing sandbox ever, but particularly for a new party, and because a new party is generally going to just be fucking excited that they're playing a game of heroic fantasy and they're using their imaginations with all of their best friends, and if they feel like they've accomplished something, that's the thing they're going to remember. They're not going to be thinking about. So the last thing that you want them to do is, especially if they're new at improvising, thinking in character, acting in character, then it can get slow very easily. So erring on the side of it being faster than slower, so they're not all looking at each other like, what do we do? I don't fucking know what to do with this. I don't know. Avoiding that is in my opinion, especially for a new party, the lesser of the two evils.
But Mikey, in my setting, it is a sandbox because all of the mirror shards have finally collapsed down into the box of the cosmos.
For eons.
And have turned
And that's where
into
you meet
sand.
the sky crab sheet dwarves. Is that where they are?
On
Well,
one shard.
they used to exist, but now only hints of their ancient civilization can be found, Mikey.
That's what everyone does to dwarves. Like, dwarves are too hard to include in a setting. They're all fucking dead now. They delve too greedily and too deep. All the dwarves are gone and dead. I don't want to deal with it. How many fucking settings?
Derek, are any of the shards in your multiverse universe, are any of the shards just gibbon monkeys? Like one shard that's just a bunch of gibbon monkeys?
Just one, but traveling there is dangerous. There will be many challenges and perils, Andy.
Thank you. Awesome. I think that was all really good advice for pacing. We've got to talk combat, and then I have kind of a lightning round ending after we answer some more questions. So let's dive into combat. This is something that a lot of people were asking about. I think people, especially, first-time players and first-time DMs, especially first-time DMs, are nervous about running combat. And we've touched on it a little bit. I know Derek's got a ton of tips and tricks for that. But what are some things that you guys would suggest for first-time DMs, for conducting combat in a way that doesn't feel like it's a slog and doesn't feel like it's like dragging on forever, right? You want to make it combat fun and exciting, and there are ways that you can help keep the pace up.
The first few times I ever ran combat, I basically was blacked out, and then all of a sudden it was over. And like the first few times you run combat is always going to be a chaos machine because you are expected to run the universe, and you are also running all of the brains of the things that are not the party. NPCs that are allies, enemies that may or may not be feral demons or intelligent casters, or whatever your configuration of combat might be. It gets overwhelming very quickly because player A just finished their turn, and now it's the monster's turn. What are the monsters going to do? You can't think of that while running player A's turn. You have to listen to them, and you have to hear what they're doing, and you have to judge how they're doing, and you have to see that they're obeying the rules. And all of a sudden, their turn is over, and all of a sudden you're being confronted. Slow down. Slow down. I know that the urge to make things feel snappy in combat is important, but when it comes to your first time playing, as long as no one's expectations is that you're going to be an expert master DM, this is the opportunity for you to start establishing some important rituals and some important tools that are always going to be able to move you through combat. Those rituals look like, when you first roll for initiative, combat has started. You are starting the combat game. It is a different game than the more free-form playing of Dungeons and Dragons. When you say roll for initiative, all of a sudden a lot of different very important rules happen in order. And you need to have a pad of paper with a blank piece of paper in front on it with a pen, and you need to be able to say who rolled what initiative. I highly recommend not saying what did everyone roll, because you're going to get 14 questions simultaneously. Ask them who rolled 20 to 30. You got 24? Anyone else? Who rolled 15 to 20? 18? 18? Okay, which one of you are going first? Okay. You write those names down. Then tell everyone, one moment, I'm going to run the universe, roll the initiative for your monsters, put everyone up on, if you are using tent cards on a DM screen, put everyone on the tent cards, do all of that work. Let it slow down there. And then the way that you kick things back up, the way you return to the fire of combat, because everyone's chomping at the bit and hungry, is you dive in with some sort of narrative description. You're all standing there, and all of a sudden the gibbon monkeys have broken free of the mirror shard universe, and they are spilling into your... How are you going to do it? You have to create the wave, and then you can run things one at a time after a time, and you just treat it like that. Make sure that you are giving yourself time to read the pieces. If you need a player to speed up, it is always something where like, hey, you need to move along. Like, let's make a decision. Sometimes I'll even, as hard as it sounds, be like, you've got 30 seconds to tell me what you're doing, or you're taking the dodge action. We have to move on because it's 7:30 and we started playing at 4:30, and that's how long your turn's taking. There are ways that you can move things along that way, but just starting to get familiar with the order of operations when it comes to combat. The first time you DM, slow down. It's totally reasonable. You will have snappy combat very quickly, but the first time you use that muscle, it's going to be a sore experience. I don't think there's any way to do it except to jump into the deep end.
I have a different view than Derek does.
I love that.
I
Great.
don't like snappy combat. And the reason I don't like snappy combat is I feel like people spend too much time with their head in stats and less in the game. I don't care if a round takes an hour. If every single person that's going is talking in character, arguing with the monster, or arguing with their friends, or trying to figure out how they're going to deal with this, if the players are having fun and they're living in the moment, let that turn of combat take as long as it needs. Because I think that those are beautiful, and the way that I look at that is the same way you would an NPC. When you're, just because combat has started doesn't mean that entity, if it can speak in things, stops interacting with the party. And so I think between turns, utilizing that is to talk about what this villain or creature is doing and how they are being aggressive, or one of my favorite things in Edge of Midnight was when the party fought the hags, and being able to antagonize between every turn, the creepy, disgusting things they would say, what they would do, the way that the environment around them would change, and that inevitably makes that turn of combat last longer. But it's juicy and thematic and fun, and by the time you're done with 1 hour combat, it didn't feel like it took an hour. And so for me, I would prefer the combats longer if everybody's into it.
Great advice.
I am going to both agree and disagree with both of the people.
Of course.
So we're saying this. I would agree that I like that style of combat, but I would say that combat is still snappy combat. Where I would say that snappy combat is not quick combat, where it's done and it started and over. It's where it's all about, does it feel like snappy combat to me is everyone is acting and they're doing it, and so they're taking their action, they're doing it, and every single moment they may do multiple things, they may interact, but it doesn't feel like where is he? Is he there? And like it's dragging on, like, oh my god, I want to fucking jump off a tall thing. And it's like where you're just feeling this sense of molasses, right? And it's very easy to do. And so I think that one of those things is where, like, actually, like, you look at some of our boss fights that we've had historically on the channel, and there's some that are 4 hours, 4.5 hours, and you're like, where the fuck did that hour go? That was an amazing combat, and it can still be we only got through fucking 6 rounds of combat, but because everyone is acting like you said, Nikki, of where it's still being done snappily, but basically there's so much that's happening in there, so much story is happening. Shove the story into it, and that's my first advice of how to make it feel to pace combat and make it feel good, is basically, rather than saying the goblin shoots you, uses arrow attack, and it shoots you and it does damage. Describe when the party, whether they hit or they miss, describe it and act it out every single time as a DM. And when the monsters are attacking, whether they're succeeding or failing, act it out, describe it, and suddenly you're ripping the party, the players, back into the narrative every single turn. So suddenly their minds are out of their phones and out of their sets and back into the story, and suddenly 4 hours can go by like that. You have a 4-hour boss fight, but it felt really fucking well paced.
Yeah.
And what's nice about that is you eventually get your players doing that.
Yes.
There used to be a time when, at our table, the only one who described that stuff was the DM. And if you watched Edge of Midnight, or if you watched Once Upon a Witchlight last week, you saw a phenomenal scene laid down by a resident crocodile alligator who did something really cool with one of his abilities. And that's the kind of thing that if if you are driving that as a DM, eventually your players will feel comfortable being like, I jump in and I do this. No, you don't need to describe it for me. I'm going to tell you how it works. This is what my spell looks like. This is how I do it. This is what I say to them. And then as a DM, you can sit back and say, I will allow you this 5-minute turn because this is amazing.
Well said.
And so basically remembering that snappiness, that it's not about just length of time, it's about how long it feels. There are short combats that
and that's
feel
the same
like,
thing with pacing.
There are short combats that feel like, oh my god, like that was a 30-minute combat. It felt like fucking 3 hours. Oh my god. But I think that, so then where I'm gonna agree and disagree with Derek, I really wish that Derek had like a bunch of takes that I disagree with, where like at first I disagree and then go, oh no, yeah, he's right. So I could have a repeat of I'm going to say do the opposite of what Derek said. I can't have that moment. But the opposite. But so I think the slow down advice, the meat of that was really good. But my advice was going to be before you even started talking, was have a sense of urgency. Just like how the party will follow the leader when it comes to RP, when it comes to engagement. If you're excited, if you have a sense of urgency and bounciness and excitement for the combat, you're inherently your players are going to bounce that off, and then once one player starts doing it, then it's going to bounce off again, and so then suddenly the intense engagement and
let me clarify.
Oh, God,
I think you should always have narrative urgency with combat. If there's no stakes, why are we even simulating this? That's hugely important. Always have something where people are chomping at the bit. But as a DM, you need to give yourself the permission to make sure that combat that you're looking at all of the things that need to be happening in combat. My memory of my earliest dungeon master moments when I was running combat was forgetting about abilities, forgetting about features, not describing what the players were doing, just starting to fast forward through things because I was just starting to lash out like a wild animal. That's what I'm trying to say. Just that is that you can give yourself permission to step back for a moment and go, whew, I'm running a lot. Give me 30 seconds. Just give me 30 fucking seconds to look at my stat block and think about what's happening right now, because we're on the edge of a cliff. Gibbon monkeys are everywhere.
Yeah.
Hold on to that. Hold on to the gibbon monkeys. I'll be right back.
And I agree with that entirely with the gibbon monkeys, where there are times where I've run boss fights where I'm like, oh my god, like the boss is out of layer, out of spell slot, she's out of this, she's out of that, and I don't know what the boss can do. The players are like, it doesn't matter if it takes you the time because they're engaged. Right. And they're like, what the fuck is the boss going to do? Oh, and they feel good. Oh my god, we have this fucking boss on the ropes when Mikey, the DM who's running this, doesn't know how to tactically make the best decision because we've been running it. It inherently makes it be where it doesn't feel like you're allowed. If you've done your job pacing it, then suddenly you can take your time and slow down, like Derek said, which is definitely true, in order to make sure that you're not just sprinting through with and making careless mistakes. And then my other example, and I've always say this, and I'm going to say it again: the right music. The right music will change the length of a combat dramatically. If it's atmospheric, like it is going to take forever and it's going to feel awful. If you have an energy, and it doesn't have to be entirely fast BPM, and I've said that before, that's technically incorrect. It can be a lower BPM song, but be very epic and grandiose and cinematic. Yeah. Or it doesn't have to be super epic, but it still needs to be high BPM.
Creepy.
It needs to feel like an intense battle song, and if it feels more atmospheric, it's not going to feel like combat and things are going to be slow. My
favorite combat song is My Heart Will Go On from the epic movie Titanic by Celine Dion.
Yep.
But the recorder version.
I was gonna give a serious suggestion and say that I think a perfect example of what Mike is saying, where it's not necessarily high BPM, but it's very dramatic and it still feels like it's driving, was the one that you used for Commodus. I believe it was Camille's theme.
Camille's theme from League of Legends, yeah.
From League. It's epic and grandiose, but it's not necessarily high BPM, right?
I think that if you tallied all of the times we've used certain songs in combat, there's one song that has been in more dramatic combats that it's just because it's so fucking effective and perfect, and it is the right amount of scary, of intense, of fast, and we use it all the time, and that is Callista's theme from League of Legends.
Ooh,
so if
yeah.
you're running, it's our combat music for fucking Edge
Curse
of
of
Midnight,
Strahd.
Curse of Strahd, Baton of Edge of Midnight, and it does work. You never get tired of it. It is, in my opinion, it is the perfect combat music where, like, you know, when in doubt, Callista's theme from League of Legends. I'm telling you.
I still think that the best combat music he ever did was like 4 hours of that slap banjo.
Oh yeah,
No spoilers, but
shuffle
man, that
banjo.
did good work. Good work.
Oh God. Awesome. I've got a good question here. I got a couple good questions. And then the last round of this, the last segment of this is going to be the thing that I asked you guys to do homework on. And based on Mikey's question, I'm going to bet money he didn't do the homework, but he'll have good answers anyway, because that's just how Mikey rolls. So the first question I have is actually for Nikki, because she's the queen of this. Is any tips for adding your own spin to module campaigns?
Change the ending.
Oh, okay.
The best module campaigns are a great framework for a story, but this is my biggest problem with modules is, and Mikey and I have talked about this at length, the amount of time that there will be information in there, but the module does not facilitate you giving that information to the players. An example being, in Death House, there's a ton of lore and information about Death House that is written for the DM to know, but the module does not explain to you how the players would get it. And so for a new DM, which, yeah, that was my first module, so I'll consider myself a new DM for that specific thing. As a new DM, I was a little bummed because I'm like, oh, well, I know this stuff, but they're never going to know it. Like, they're not going to know about this guy that died in this library here and all the information that he was learning and how cool all of this stuff is. Like, there's no way for them to get this or this or this. And that was the moment that I first was like, oh, okay, I need to just put it in there. I'm going to write my own journal entry. And when they're in there, they're going to find the journal entry and it's going to be of what this person experienced. And then they'll have that information too. And that was the moment that I was like, oh, well, if I can do that, then why, like, for me, it wasn't impactful that Curse of Strahd spoilers, that in the module you kill Strahd and Strahd just comes back within 100 years. And it just happens over and over and over again. I was like, well, I mean, that's cool, and I guess we could run Curse of Strahd more often, but, like, I want to tell a story. And so that was when I was like, I'm going to change the ending. And when and if Strahd dies, then that happens. But then that led me to, okay, well, if I'm going to change the ending, well, Strahd needs a backstory now. And the one that's in there is good, but I need it to be more. Like, I want to tie Strahd more to this character, and I want there to be reasons for this happening. And, well, I really like this NPC, so I want to make them better. So as you're reading through the book and your things are resonating with you, write them down and then go through, and if their ending wasn't fulfilling for you, change it. Or you didn't like this NPC, like they irked you out and you just thought they were kind of creepy and you don't want to add them, get rid of them. Put a new one in there. Just make it tailor the module to yourself and what you're passionate about and what you like, because then as a DM, your players will feel that in your story.
Mm-hmm. Right. Awesome.
I've never run an actual module, but I did
That's not
read. I think I read almost the entirety of Curse of Strahd while working on Beneath Dark Wings. I think I did. And
After Curse of Strahd happened.
or not Curse of Strahd, sorry, on Beneath Dark Wings.
Yeah.
I read all of Curse of Strahd while working on Beneath Dark Wings after Curse of Strahd, after we finished our finale. I read the entire thing. And it is remarkable how unremarkable the actual written stuff is compared to what we did. And I think the way that I would articulate it in the easiest terms is a module is written for a gamer. It is written to play a game. I would basically retool it to make it more narrative. And I know, I say basically learn, the more you learn about the tenets of what makes good narrative, the better you'll be able to have more narrative games. I would say for these modules to think about it less of a loose story that's more to play a game around, build the game and build the skeleton that they have, and build it into a more compelling narrative with a clear beginning, middle, and end, and everything that Nikki said.
But Mikey, didn't you run Storm King's Thunder?
I attempted to run one
Princess
session
of the
of Princess of the
Apocalypse?
Apocalypse. And maybe I was doing it wrong, maybe my memory is faulting, but Princess of the Apocalypse, sorry Wizards of the Coast, is the biggest pile of shit I've ever read in my entire life.
Oh wait, are you talking about when we asked you to try to run it when we were snowed in?
So
that basically doesn't count because we were just.
It absolutely does not count.
No, we were. No. I need to explain the situation because it's not even worth mentioning. Basically, is that we were fiending so hard for more D&D. The only thing that we had was I don't even know how we had the book or the PDF or whatever it was. I guess it was you guys just had it on hand. We basically were like, Mike, start reading this and then try to run it. And he's like flipping through trying to run it. And after like maybe 10 minutes, he's like, "This like that's just not going to happen. Like we just can't do that. I need time to read it."
Well, I mean, to be fair, I had read a little bit of it before we started, right? Because I bought it because I would like to run this. When we may have more games to play, and I tried to read it afterwards too, right? And so, like, when I was reading through the module, it was like that meme with Joe Pesci, where he's like, "What the fuck is this pile of shit?" or whatever.
Right.
That was me. That was like, "What the fuck is this bullshit?" Like,
yeah.
That was me and so it's that. Talk about a fucking module that is not written to be narrative. Like, here's a bunch of shit. Here's a bunch of dungeons. Here's a bunch of enemies to kill. It's like playing the original Zelda, where it's just a series of dungeons and you go and then you kill Ganon in the Shadow Realm and that's it. Like, that's what it fucking felt like to me. So make it more narrative. That's my overall.
I think that the lesson here though is that if you are going to run a module, read the whole module, get it into your blood, and then follow Nikki's advice.
I love that. We got one more question, and then we're going to lightning speed the last round because knowing us, at a lightning breakneck pace, we'll still run over, which is fine.
We each have 30 seconds to answer the question, or we take the dodge out.
Well, it's not going to quite work like that, but yeah, I love where your head's at. This is a question from Shop Fox. Do y'all have tips for practicing improv so that you're not so caught off guard when your players go off script? Thank you so much for your support, Fox. We really appreciate it as well. We've talked about this a little bit when we've done some of our player panels, but this is a good idea, like looking at, practicing improv from a DM perspective, right? Do you guys have any tips regarding that?
I'll go very quickly because I think I actually already answered this earlier in the stream, and I know that you jumped in a little bit later, totally fine. But basically, learning your setting, learning your world intimately, learning the theme that you're trying to evoke, learn the theme of the people, learning the theme of the enemies and the antagonists, and learn the pieces on the board. And the more that you learn the pieces that are on the board and the how and the why, rather than just the what, if you learn the how and the why of your setting, your antagonists, your creatures, your themes, your NPCs, and all of that, and you have that very intimately understood, improvising becomes much, much, much easier. So for me, it's really more about and so to practice, basically go in with less prep, right? Do what I did in Root, the original campaign, and then in this one where I know the woodland, I know the setting, I know the clearings, I know the politics, I know the denizens, and we'll just see what the fuck happens. So
force yourself to improv more. Force yourself to get more reps.
Yeah, you can leave blank spaces in an adventure where you're like, I don't know what this is going to be, and it will push you in that direction. I think that Dungeons and Dragons isn't actually the best improv teaching tool. We've talked a little bit about this channel that part of when we leveled up as improvisational players and role playing, it was when we started playing Root, which was extremely freeform. And a tool that I would recommend when it comes to the exercise that you can do for improv is actually a short role-playing game. Very straightforward rules. Games shouldn't last more than 20, 30 minutes. It's called Everyone is John. That is a game where you are absolutely forced to confront the realities of making things up as you go along. You are Wallace and Gromit style, putting the train tracks down just to make sure that it doesn't crash in time. Thinking about things in those ways, I wouldn't go full improv. I wouldn't necessarily go take an improv class to get better at Dungeons and Dragons because there are other tools that you need behind the screen that an improv class cannot teach you. There's a different thing happening behind the screen and at the table. But forcing yourself, to Mikey's point and to your point, Andy, I think that you can find ways. You just have to jump off the cliff and start figuring it out and be comfortable not doing great at it until you start doing great at it. It's how you get good at any skill.
I want to put an exclamation point on not going out and joining taking improv classes, because just how we said how role playing and D&D isn't acting, it isn't writing, it isn't it isn't improv either. It's not black sweater improv, as I call it.
Oh my God, jeez Louise.
It's not black sweater improv. It's something that's totally different, and it uses writing, it uses acting, it uses improv, but it is none of those things directly. Where like taking a voice acting class or taking an improv class or taking a writing class can help certain things, but it's not going to replace it's not going to give you all the tools to role play.
Give us a sport, and I need a pizza topping, and I need a location.
Hey, who ordered all the anchovies to Kim Kardashian's house? Whoa, look at that thing. You can bounce a salon.
Okay, cut.
Oh, Honey Heist. Honey Heist was another really good blend. Honey Heist does some fucking work, I'll tell you.
Oh, God.
Honey Heist was fucking amazing.
Nikki, did you have any thoughts on improving improv as a DM?
No, because I'm just gonna be honest here and say, like, I'm just the way that I am. Like, I don't know how I improv, and so it would be difficult to teach someone how to do it, because I think I just played a lot of... I lived out in the middle of a desert growing up, and my brother and I didn't like each other, so I had no one to play with. So I hung out by myself, and I told my own stories. And I would run through the desert and make up my own stories in my mind and play all of the characters. And that's basically D&D DMing.
Yeah.
So I can't really give tips on that, because I was built this way.
That's fair. I just, I think that's still valuable input, and I think that, we love hearing, your stories that are just, I love that shit.
So just go out into the desert.
Yeah, like
That's right.
I believed that D'Artagnan from Three Musketeers was my long lost love, and so I used to play Cinderella X Three Musketeers. And then I used to play Ganondorf is Gonna Get Ya. So that's how you learn.
Is really gonna get ya.
But I used to call him Pigwort because I could never remember his actual name.
That's fair. That's valid.
So that's how
D'Artagnan
you
is a
learn
really
to
good
improv.
name.
Is
Isn't
doing
D'Artagnan
whatever
a
that
good
is.
name?
So, good questions. Thank you so much for the support, Fox. We appreciate it. Thank you so much for the support, everyone. We really appreciate it. Well, this is it. This is a lightning round, right? Take as much time as you need. But, basically what I wanted to kind of finish up with was one mega segment of tips, tricks, and common pitfalls. And that was the homework I asked you guys to do last week. It was to think about the tips and the tricks, the common pitfalls, maybe what kind of DM gear you use. Nikki, I would love to hear some of your thoughts on props. Maybe that's a little bit too much for a first-time DM, but I don't know. You kind of blew it out of the water on doing some strong stuff. So just kind of take some time, and someone will inevitably say something that will someone else will want to comment on. We'll just kind of go around the horn, but I want you guys to give your best tips, tricks, and common pitfalls that we may not have touched on, or something that you want to dive in on a little bit more that even we may have mentioned.
I can go.
Yeah, and just say whether or not it's a tip or a trick or a common pitfall.
I've already mentioned this as far as the common pitfalls, or rather, I talked about this earlier in the stream, but I'm gonna I'm gonna highlight it in yellow highlighter. Is beware the tyranny of the concept qua concept. And that sounds like it's a bunch of psychobabble horseshit.
It does. It really does.
I believe it is important where, as a DM, what matters, I think the biggest common pitfall is not thinking about the story, but in thinking about, oh, I wanted to create a world, I wanted to run a campaign because of all of this cool stuff. My ideas are so fucking cool. My ideas are so good. My players are gonna fucking love it.
Mom's gonna freak.
Mom's gonna freak.
Mom's gonna freak. That's
And
right.
Dad's gonna wake up.
At the end of the day, those people generally, if you go in with that attitude, they're going to be disappointed. And they're going to be upset that the players are not engaging in their world and their lore and their setting and their cool concepts they thought of as much as they thought. But man, I worked really hard on this. And that's good. You should work hard on it. But it's your job, once you work hard on it, to make your players give a shit about the cool stuff. Right? It's one of those things where, like, I could have done, like, I created the city of Agway, and it's fantasy New Orleans, and there's all these different factions, and there's all this different stuff, and there's a fucking vampire, and a voodoo black dragon, and all this crazy-ass shit. But those were simply tools in order to craft the narrative. I would never, in my opinion, maybe I did, if you go watch Prime's, you know, the second streamed arc, the third arc of the story, I was never like, guys, look! You shouldn't care. It doesn't matter the story, but look how cool this is. Whoa! And so I built a story, and those were the building blocks. This is what it is. The common pitfall is to use the cool stuff as the building blocks of a narrative that feels good, as opposed to building a ham-fisted narrative to show off the cool stuff that you thought of.
And it should be icing. That's what you're saying.
Yes, it should be organic. It should be icing. It should be that they will care about the cool stuff you thought of if you successfully use it in an elegant way and in a proper narrative, and that's when they'll care. So that to me is the biggest pitfall. The other biggest pitfall when it comes to world building is filling out all the corners of your world. I think the biggest pitfall that most DMs or most world builders do is they build out their pantheon. And it's like, wow, wouldn't it be really cool if, like, if your player comes to you, wouldn't it be cool, like, I could worship this death god? Well, the god of death in this setting is X. It's only X. So if you want to have a death thing, it's got to be themed around this god. Sorry. My pantheon is this. There's nothing else. I remember I didn't even play D&D. I saw the 3.5 book, and I saw their pantheon of gods. And I'm like, I fucking hate all these gods. This is it? This is all there fucking is? And I thought that's the world there was. I thought that was horseshit back when I was 12. And so the pantheon is usually the biggest thing where DMs will basically write themselves into a corner. And then filling out the land masses, the cities, the cultures of, like, oh shit, I have no room to put this story or this thing because, well, it's not on the map. It's not on everything that I filled out. I didn't think about it 6 years ago. So
right.
Have your map be very much your world. Feel free to retcon. Feel free to build it out. Feel free to expand. I think those are probably the two biggest pitfalls for early DMs and early storytellers.
Did you do your homework, Nikki?
Huh?
Did you do your homework?
What was the homework?
Just to, have a bunch of tips and tricks and common pitfalls and things that.
Oh no, I didn't do my homework.
I didn't think anybody was going to. It's okay.
I have some shit. I don't know.
I have shit too. I can finish. I can continue to expand. So basically, I did do it. That's why I was thinking of all this stuff. I was like trying to
I don't believe you, Mike, but I need to be prepared either way.
I've got it. Well, either I'm lying and I'm good at improv.
You're good at
or
improv,
I'm
exactly.
telling the truth.
Well, he took a bunch of black sweater improv classes, so
Yeah, exactly.
we're not allowed. We don't have to listen to him.
Props are really good and they're fun, but I would say they're not mandatory. I was never someone.
No.
I am the Dick Map Meister. I'm Dick Map Meister. Mike, they call me. And I had shittily drawn maps and shittily printed tokens, and that was really the only props that I used. And if there's things that you want to show off to help the immersion, I think that always helps. Music, lighting, art that you print out of you can describe it, but then showing up the creature that you see or the NPC, that goes a long way, but I would say that it's optional.
My favorite prop, most people would expect me to say the pencil, because that was connected to a narrative moment, nice bound, no spoilers, that really landed. And I'm very proud of it. But I actually think, and no one will ever experience this, many times when we run Icebound, I put on a thematic candle. And I highly recommend smell and memory being connected as they are, that if you are putting on a candle that smells like the sea or smells like the town, and you start using those in a consistent way, you'll create a pattern that's very cool. But I agree with Mikey. I would be able to run an adventure, I think, as exciting as in the same adventure with three-dimensional perfect terrain of all of the different things. It would be neat. It would be really cool, but it's nice to have. What's actually happening is in your mind, that is where the adventure is happening. And what you are picturing in the mind actually gets kind of granular and has specificity when you're looking at a table. There's something about a general dick-shaped map that actually does more work for me when it comes to what I am picturing in my head than if it were down to the every last little detail, perfectly stocked, granular, that whole thing. Maybe that's just me, but that's how I like my D&D.
Sure.
Common pitfalls, I'll say it in the same way or in a different way, but I'll echo what Mikey was saying. Going too epic too soon. You really do have to earn. You really do have to earn stuff like this, especially if this is your first time DMing. This should not be an epic conflict of gods and all of that. You should have an idea of those things, but keeping things very small. There are so many times I've read stories or people asking for advice, going, "Hey, I'm a first-time DM, and I agreed to do a level 20 one-shot where they're fighting the gods of the universe in an epic insanity battle," and it's like, that should have taken you quite a few sessions, quite a few, at least more than a handful of sessions.
Yep. Great fucking point.
There's nothing wrong with levels 1 through 6. I know that there's a huge temptation to want to get to level 3 or level 6 because mechanically there's some really cool, nifty things you can do if you get there. But honestly, if you're running your first adventure, they should be paper mache level 1. I could kill you accidentally with a swarm of rats level. Do yourself that favor and think about just starting there. Because you can always adjust. Well, we're going to fast forward a year and now you're level 12 because we didn't enjoy level 1. Fine. But for your very first session, everyone's still figuring out, I add my strength to my attack roll and to my damage? Neat. That's got to be the level that you start at.
Right.
Tips.
I would say...
Tips. Oh, sorry.
I want to echo and congratulate you on your well-made point, Derek. As far as starting off at level 1, even as an experienced player, and I think that we can all say we're experienced players. I think objectively that's true. Where I think about starting off as level 1 as both Sarnax and Jericho and Barnabas. Yeah. And how much fucking fun I had playing those characters at those levels. Yeah. I loved levels 1, 2, 3 as those characters. To me, it's almost like you get used to when you're playing these campaigns, you're level 14 or 15, it's like, oh my god, I can fucking kill God. 5 of us can kill God pretty easily at 15 and 16. And then suddenly going back to that and really kind of, then it's forcing you to do all the flavoring yourself because
yes.
As a bard, I literally can shoot you with the bow, but I didn't take a bow because I'm a fucking scarecrow. So I have a strength-based fucking sickle, and I can use Vicious Mockery.
Yeah.
And so it forces you, I only have 3 spells that I can cast. And so it forces you to think about the theme with your minimal kit and how you're executing that theme at all varying levels. To me, that's very fun.
The most I felt like that was when I played Kaio. And I was waiting to unlock more things mechanically, but I was flavoring it all myself, right? Because we had nothing, right?
Tips and tricks.
Yep.
Tips. When you're done with your outline, you're going to have some names of places and people. You're going to have some general magic items they might find. You're going to read it all out loud. Say the words out loud. You're gonna have to, don't laugh, Andy. Don't laugh. You're gonna have to sit in front of a DM screen and say it out loud anyway. So why not just do it now? We are all alone. Because when you have an NPC named Ellis Coombs, things might not go so great. Things might not go so great for you.
You mean they go
if you
amazing.
haven't read that out loud. And
Amazing.
you found it in a book of historical names that you think is really the tits, and you let that make your decision for you. And now,
absolutely classic Farnox.
Farnox.
Fartbox.
We also went to Far Canyon in a one shot.
Yeah. Never do FAR blank anything.
We had the NPC.
Don't use the word far.
We had the NPC anus.
We did have anus. I forgot about anus.
I will never forget about anus.
I forgot about anus.
Whatever happened to that guy?
It's not just for the stupid jokes we're making about how you can mispronounce names or misinterpret them. Reading things out loud will get it into your blood. It is also that. All right, tricks. I'm going to give you tricks. A really, really healthy trick to ask anybody who is participating in a game anytime, and this is especially true at the beginning of a scene or an end of a scene or a transition or just to slow things down, ask them how they are feeling. You are allowed to say a player name. How is your character feeling about this moment? That is such an important question, and it doesn't have to do it doesn't have to do with anything. Now, you can ask it at any time, and it's really, really, really healthy. It forces players to confront who they are playing and role play. It forces them to look in the mirror. They might have a question. They might have an answer right out of the gate. That's awesome. That's great if they do because they're inhabiting their characters and the whole thing. But if they haven't been as engaged with the session, it's a really good way to get people to come on board a little bit harder. It's a really good way for everyone to hear how that person who might have not been giving away the whole game, who might not wear their emotions on their sleeve, either as a player or because of how they are role playing their character. Ask people how their characters are feeling often, frequently. It really, really does wonders to open up the book of collaborative storytelling because everyone has that extra little meta-knowledge clue to start weaving in and being like, you know what? Maybe I noticed that this person's feeling coy or shy around this NPC, and I'm going to go over and do... All of a sudden, opportunities start showing up. That question does terrific work. I highly recommend it. Also, if you're a nude DM, take off your clothes. You can't be a nude DM without taking...
Don't do that. That's bad advice. That's bad advice.
I'm sorry. Did I mishear? I'm sorry.
No, we don't. No.
What you do in the privacy of your own home with consenting friends is no business of
between
ours.
you and your friends and your God.
That's right. Awesome advice. I wanted to just kind of open it up again to anybody. Please, final thoughts or tips, tricks, common pitfalls. Any last thoughts?
I'm gonna follow up from Derek Brandrisk Hudson, and think about a tip that affects combat pacing and affects the best thing that I ever did was take every single stat block that I ever ran and transcribe it into a note card. It doesn't have to be note cards. I like big note cards, but if you want to do it in a notebook, you want to do it on a whiteboard, you want to do it any other way, even when I homebrew and I craft it, it's when I take the time and even if I'm building a full boss and I'm building all of that, I make sure I take what's in my head or what's on the page, goes into my eyeballs, goes into my brain, goes down my arm, goes to a pencil, and I write out everything. That process makes me 10 times at least more intimately aware of what that creature can do.
Yep.
You are much less likely to forget abilities. You're much less likely to forget features. You are going to be able to run it a lot more proficiently, and you are not going to need to be like, oh, hold on, what does it do again? If you take the time ahead of time to transcribe the stat block into a shorthand that works for you. Also, I think that there are better ways to shorthand quickly refer to stat blocks that beyond the stat block format. I think there's a lot better ways. And so I've worked out a shorthand that works for me, but you may find a system that works for you. find that system and write it physically out. Don't type it up, write it out, and I promise you, you are going to become, combat is going to feel so much better when you start doing that. That is the biggest
1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. That is a trick. That is a secret shortcut to getting super familiar with what you need to do. Mikey and I have both done that forever. I don't know what Nikki's been up to with her bag of note cards over there, but I'm on board with the copying it down and repeating it. We'll get it in here very quickly.
Mine is significantly less involved. I've seen Mike's. Mine look like this. Boss name. AC. Speed. Then if there are any immunities, I'll put write them out. Resistances, res, write them out.
Nice.
Aside from that, the only other thing that I have on there are attacks, 1, attacks, 2. And then it'll be bite, 2d4 plus 4. And that's like it. I mean, at most I'll add like plus or con save 15, 2d6 poison.
Sure.
And like,
it's really funny because
it's like the most basic thing you could possibly imagine.
I do think that that's all you need most of the time. Like 99% of the time, that's how combat ends up is requiring that level of broad stroke. I need this, I need this, I need this, and then I can run it, and the rest of it is how can I flavor this, what's narratively important at the time, all of those things.
Yeah.
Having just finished one of the stat blocks for Crooked Moon, that feels terrible because of all of the mechanical balancing that I just did. But that being said, I think it's important that we all think about the Crooked Moon and talk about how important it is to become a VIP. I'm trying my hardest, Mikey. Please help me.
Keep going, Derek. Keep going, Derek. You're doing fine. You're doing
He's
fine.
believing. He's starting to believe.
Come on.
You can do it.
Complete
You
the
can do it,
metamorphosis into a
Derek. You
shield
can do
master.
it.
I was trying.
Oh God, that was great. Yeah. So the Crooked Moon, go become a VIP today.
We're 15 away
Yeah.
to our next goal.
Are we
We are
only 15 away?
We are 15
Oh,
away from 4,300. 15
amazing.
away
So
from
close.
4,300 VIPs.
We really are so
Join-
close.
Join the best community. Look at the amazing stuff we're offering. So much. Thank you.
Any final thoughts? Any poignant? Except you're not allowed to talk about soup. Any other poignant?
I'm not gonna. I wasn't gonna. I told you you would all be hungry for the soup when I stopped talking about the soup.
Nope.
Here's what I'll say.
Okay.
If it is your first time DMing, get excited about what you're going to Dungeon Master for. Emotion is contagious. It is the most important thing of all the stuff that we've talked about tonight. The one tip I can give you is if you're excited about the story, if you are scared about parts of it, if you are emotion about thing, your players will pick up on that emotion and they will feed off of that, and it will make for a great story if you can find the emotions that you want to weave into the tale that you're trying to tell. If you want to tell a horror story, get scared. Find something that scares you and you will scare your players. If you want to tell a story of heroic fantasy, think about how powerful they're going to feel when they defeat the such and such that you're putting in front of them, and they will feel like heroes by the end. That is something. There is a very mirror, reflecty, reverberating, resonating thing that happens between the play. You're a player too. You're not. The Dungeon Master is playing Dungeons and Dragons. They have a very different role, but you are a player too. You should be having fun, and they will have fun. You should be excited, and they will be excited. You should be all of those emotions. Let yourself feel and breathe through it, and don't be afraid to fail, because there's very few versions of Dungeons and Dragons where you fail. There are very, very few things where it truly, truly collapses, and those are only in the very most extreme situations where shit happens. You don't have to worry about that. Get excited. Get excited and get pumped about the adventure, and you're going to have the best time. I promise.
Thank you.
Final thought from me, which is something that I've seen a lot from, like, especially back at like years ago when I used to kind of watch more Twitch streams and like be more kind of observant of what was like going on, of these DMs kind of having this erudite attitude of not basically my advice is to not take yourself seriously. I think that you see a lot of groups or actual plays or whatever, where like our dungeon master is a master storyteller, is a legend, and they're sitting there and they have this erudite like idea of I am the Wizard of Oz and I have the grand knowledge. I am truly the greatest storyteller in the world. I truly am the next Matt Mercer. If you have that attitude in your game, I think that you will be surprised at how much it hampers it.
Yeah.
I think remember that that you may be a dungeon master, but you're also a player of Dungeons and Dragons. Maybe
the old adage of you never want to be the smartest person in the room holds true. You can change smart to whatever you want, but you never want to be the best person in the room, right?
Or the fastest person on the highway.
And so, yeah, basically don't take yourself so seriously. Remember that you're a player and not kind of have this kind of grandiose, professorial, like detached, man behind the curtain, blah, 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 blah. That's my final tip and trick.
Nikki.
Be flexible. It's, I think, the best thing that I've ever done as a DM is to stop expecting perfection, stop expecting stories to go the way I think they're going to go, sessions, fights, NPCs, voices, it doesn't matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
Lower your expectations and you'll surprise yourself 100% of the time. But just be flexible and go with the flow. And whatever choice you make sure that the choice that you're making is because either you're trying to have fun or you're trying to facilitate the fun of the players.
Thank you. We have a few more people to thank. Namely, one, Bunny, for a $10 super chat. Said very nice things. Thanks for showing us our future baby Hootsie the Cutesy. I can't wait to squish her. Love you guys. Thank you so much for your support, Bunny.
Thank you,
we
Bunny.
really appreciate it.
Squishy.
The other people that I have to thank, of course, are the other 3 people here with me on the show tonight. Thank all of you for coming out. I appreciate you guys for being here. You make this very easy on me, and I enjoy talking to you every week because you're my best friends.
Aww.
So thanks for being here. I think the advice that we gave over the last 3 weeks is unbelievable. I think that any new DM who comes to our channel or new to the Avantris fam, I hope that we can direct them to this series of episodes because this is fantastic. This was very cool.
I'm thrilled that next week we're going to start your second time DMing part 1.
Oh, amazing.
And that'll be at least 6 episodes.
Yeah, it's going to be fantastic.
I also want to call out, want to shout out everyone who is here because you fucking love Chuckles. The Crooked Moon features Chuckles. He's in it.
There you go.
Chuckles
There you go.
in the Crooked Moon. So if you become a VIP, you will find more Chuckles content than you even are expecting. So
then you can
if
shake a stick
Chuckles,
at.
Dude Chuckles, then please become a VIP. Chuckles is in it. He's there.
I think that's a great advice. Go to thecrookedmoon.com, become a VIP. As far as scheduling goes, we will be back on Twitch on Wednesday with Once Upon a Witchlight. I can promise you, you do not want to miss this episode. This is going to be unreal. It's going to be absolutely off the chain. Then this Friday, we've got Icebound, which is also just absolutely reaching a fever pitch. Unbelievable. Cannot wait for that. Everybody's just begging for that to be more than once a month, and I wish. Then next Saturday, the 16th, we have the next episodes of Stardust Rhapsody, which is going to be a lot of fun.
Shit.
Yeah, I know. It's going to sneak up on us.
Yeah,
quickly.
that's madness. This is going to be a hell of a month.
But thank you all. We appreciate it. Make sure you check out the merch shop, check out the Patreon. Go to thecrookedmoon.com, become a VIP today. It's our very first Kickstarter, and I can tell you we are just absolutely going to blow the doors off the place. That's all I can tell you. All right? You don't want to miss it.
And
thank you so much for being
Hootsie.
Yes. Check out the link to go get your own Hootsie. We've now shown her.
I love her.
She's adorable. Thank you all for your support. We love you guys. We'll see you on Wednesday. Thanks for being here. And other than that, have a lovely night. Godspeed. And we'll see you soon. Thanks, guys.